join you here, but I'm a little nervous because my internet has been misbehaving. So we'll see how this goes. Abigail, you're standing at the ready, huh?
There's my script.
With your
Well, I don't know who
script.
my wife is. What is this?
We're interchangeable, Jack. Don't worry.
Yeah, right.
Are we gonna? Let's see. Are we? This is early though, right? This is sooner
Yes.
than we
Yeah.
were scheduled.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you came to write this for Pride and Prejudice 200 and the project?
Yeah, sure. That's exactly how you just gave it away, Abigail. I really love to write missing scenes. I don't tend to write. Let's see, where's my speaker view? I'm not.
There you are.
Not finding speaker view now. Well,
Speaker
as long as you
view
people
should
are on
be-
speaker view, then it's okay, right?
It's at the top corner.
Top
If you-
corner.
Yes.
Yes. The key person to be in speaker view is me because I'm the host. So as you don't need to worry about being in speaker view.
Okay, I don't need
As long
to
as
see
I
a
am.
picture of myself, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really write variations, quote unquote variations, at least I haven't yet. I sort of tend to feel like Jane Austen's stories are, near to gospel. And so I haven't messed with changing them, but I like to add on to them, building laterally or in time, chronologically. So I've written sequels. For those of you who are not that familiar with my work, I've written sequels and I've written stories for side characters, which is just another form of writing those missing scenes. Things that either we know happen but aren't fully expanded or whatever. And so this was another missing scene. And yes, I did write it for Austen Variations several years ago now. And it was included in that compilation that we did, that trying to think of the name of it, which Abigail just said.
It's Pride and Prejudice Behind the Scenes. And
Yeah.
if you go looking for it, you can still purchase it. And all the proceeds from it are being donated to the Jane Austen's House Museum. We've donated over $12,000 to them since we published that.
Very good. I knew Abigail would have the facts at her fingertips. I get confused because there's two books that are similarly titled and I get mixed up which one's which. So yeah, I originally wrote this scene between the Gardiners for that purpose. And then a very cool thing happened. Somebody, another Jane Austen fan was chatting with me online about, that would make such a cool little play. And then first she was kind of joking. And then she said, hey, I'm serious. Can we have your permission to present this at our Jane Austen, our JASNA group meeting for their December meeting which is always the one that celebrates Jane Austen's birthday. And so yes, I gave them my permission and I guess it was well received. I would have loved to have been there. It was in Vancouver, Canada, which is close, but not that close for me. And so I didn't get to watch it, but I got to see some still pictures and got a nice note afterwards about how it went. And so I guess I can officially call myself a playwright now. And then for today, I kind of expanded a little bit and I recruited Jack as my husband. Congratulations, Jack, you were my first choice. You would probably be more flattered if it weren't for the fact that you are the only man in our group.
I already figured that one out.
And anyway, he's been a good sport about that. And I appreciate Abigail for being willing to run the technical side of the program so I don't have to worry about that. Oh, I forgot to put my stage lights back on. Jack, you wanted more light when I saw you last time when we rehearsed. So there, how's that?
Gotta be able to see you.
Whew, lots of light. And do you like my background? I've constructed it.
It's very good. It's very good. Yeah, great job.
I thought it kind of looked like wallpaper, like you might, like in Lambton might have that on the walls. So,
That's true.
so that's where that came from. Do we wait, Abigail, or do we charge ahead here? I don't know if anybody's tuning in just for this segment, but I wouldn't want them to miss it. Jack, why don't you give something impromptu here?
Well, I'm very pleased and proud to be part of this project. It's a lot of fun. Don't expect too much professionalism out of this. We're just having some fun. We're just going through a really interesting piece that Shannon wrote and was able to translate it to put it on again as a play. So it's a lot of fun. We're just trying to give you an idea of Shannon's work and the way she views the whole situation with Jane Austen. And I think there's some things that we can talk about after we actually do this little presentation. And some questions I'm going to ask Shannon, and maybe we'll get some feedback from some of y'all. But so I think if you're ready to roll, I think we're good to go, huh?
Okay. Yeah, Jack and I had a Zoom meeting the other day to do a bit of a rehearsal since I've actually met Jack once. Do you remember when it was, Jack?
Yeah, that would be that was the Jansen meeting in. Was that Jansen meeting in Minneapolis?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah, my one and only Jansen meeting I was able to make because
Well,
I lived right down the road at the time. I was living in Wisconsin.
Oh. It's my one and only too. So I guess not too many options there that where we could have met.
Right.
But anyway, let's see. Well, I was going to set the stage a little bit for this scene. It's a scene that takes place in chapter 45 of Pride and Prejudice, where Elizabeth and her aunt and Uncle Gardiner have made their second visit to Pemberley now. Mr. Gardiner to accept Mr. Darcy's invitation to go fishing, and the ladies to wait on Georgiana. And according to the book, Elizabeth and her aunt talk over all the day's events on their return drive to Lambton, everything except Mr. Darcy. So don't you suppose Mrs. Gardiner would be champing at the bit for a private conference on the subject with her husband as soon as they were alone together in the room at the inn? So here is that scene. That is after I take a moment to get into character. There. Now, hopefully I look a little bit more like Mrs. Gardiner. So here we go. What a day we have had, my dear. I could barely contain my curiosity on the drive back from Pemberley. I can tell you that much. But Lizzie, that sly thing, she would not say a word about the one topic that interested me most. And of course, I could not open the subject myself, could I? Since we are finally alone, though, I can at least hear your opinion about it.
Speak plainly, my dear. You give me far too much credit. Despite these many years of marriage, I still cannot always read your mind.
Can you not? That is very strange. I seem to always know what you are thinking. Well, in any case, my question is simply this. What say you about Mr. Darcy?
Is that it? Then I say he has some of the finest fishing in the country. I wish you had seen today's catch today, my love. I dare say there were some of the best specimens I have ever had the pleasure of pulling in. There was one in particular, one of prodigious size, that put up a heroic fight.
No, Mr. Gardiner, not the fishing. It is your opinion of the man I am far more interested in. What say you about your host, Mr. Darcy, now that you have spent more time in his company?
Oh, well, that's another matter altogether. But my opinion of him is equally high, I should think. He is as fine a fellow as I have ever come across, and a great deal more civil than your average rich man.
No arrogance, then? No false pride?
None that I could see. He is perhaps a little reserved, but he could not have been more accommodating or more obliging to me. That speaks well of his character, I think, especially when you consider there could be nothing in it for him. There is no reason Mr. Darcy should have gone on his way for someone like me. I am nowhere near his equal in wealth or position. and I have no influence or acquaintance that could possibly interest him. Yes, I thought it most positive proof of his generous nature. But you had opportunity to observe Mr. Darcy's behavior today as well, when he joined you and the other ladies. What is your own opinion?
Oh, well, I quite agree with you that he seems a fine fellow.
Well, then, there you have it.
He certainly is an impressive gentleman, with his fine, tall person and commanding presence. When Mr. Darcy entered the room today, I can tell you that every female eye was drawn to him at once. I must say that even I felt a little flutter of it.
That will do, Mrs. Gardiner. I believe we have an accurate picture.
Very well, but I must tell you that there was something else about him, something I observed. It cannot have been my imagination, can it?
You are speaking in riddles again, madam. Do explain yourself.
Oh, yes, of course. I'm sorry. It's just this. I must beg to differ with you on one point you mentioned a moment ago, your presumption of having no influence or acquaintance of value to Mr. Darcy. I think you may be wrong there.
Really? How so?
I believe your niece may be of very particular interest to him, in fact.
Elizabeth? That seems hardly likely. Their past acquaintance was but trifling, and we know the decided dislike she's expressed for the man.
Oh, but that was before we came to Pemberley.
What are you saying? That Lizzie has lost her head because of his wealth? She is far too firm of mind for that.
No, I only meant that first impressions are not always accurate, as you must admit. Remember, it was not me, but my sister that you preferred in the beginning. And likewise, first impressions are not always immutable either. By choosing me, you have proved that as well. I think a change may be at work. Lizzie did not seem to disdain Mr. Darcy's company today, and anybody who watched the two of them together this afternoon, how solicitous he was, how anxious to promote a friendship between his sister and our niece, must suspect there is more to the connection than Lizzie has admitted.
Perhaps you are right, my dear. Now that you mention it, Mr. Darcy could not get away from the stream quick enough once I told him that you and Elizabeth was calling on his sister. That was the end of fishing for him. Clearly, in his mind, what was going forward in the house was more pressing, the company there more intriguing.
Oh, imagine our niece, mistress of Pemberley.
Do you not think you may be leaping forward too far, or perhaps too rapidly?
Well, perhaps, but oh, I'm impatient to know the truth of it. If only Elizabeth would begin the subject. You know how she talked all around the idea of Mr. Darcy after we came away. His sister, his house, his grounds, even his table. Everything in favorable, yet guarded terms. Not one word did she venture on the interesting person at the heart of it all, the man himself, though I could have sworn she was near busting with it one time and then another. That must mean something. If she is secretly in love with a man, who could blame him?
You seem a bit dazzled by Mr. Darcy yourself, my dear. Perhaps the feeling is mutual. Perhaps you are the real reason he hurried back today and not our niece. You are still a fine-looking woman, after all.
Oh, at my age? Fie, Mr. Gardiner. How you do love to tease me.
I speak nothing but the truth.
And I love you for it sincerely. But do be serious now and think of Elizabeth. Do not you believe her happiness would be safe in Mr. Darcy's care? Yes, I would be very pleased to see her married to him as soon as may be. What a fine establishment it would make for our niece.
And what a fine thing for us, if we should be welcome to visit her at Pemberley as much as we like thereafter.
You are thinking of the fishing again, my dear.
Oh, one cannot overlook that advantage to the match.
Very true. Remember how we were forced to abbreviate our walking tour the other day when I grew tired? I'm sure I shall never be completely happy until I have been all the way around the park by some means or another.
10 miles, we are told. Next time, a carriage of some sort, I think. Perhaps a phantom with a pair of sturdy ponies.
Oh, yes, my dear, that would be the very thing.
The end.
I see Abigail clapping. Thank you. Yes, I'm sure there's applause rolling in, but we just can't hear it, right? Everybody's muted.
Well, we could actually unmute them for a while. I mean, we can do that.
Just look over at the comments.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was awesome.
Yeah.
This makes me love the Gardiners even more. How droll this couple is. Love it. Clap, clap, clap. Clap, 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 clap. Great job. That was lovely. Thanks. So much fun.
Oh, that's good for my ego. Yeah. I'm glad people like the Gardeners. I do plan to do a book about the Gardeners one day. Not, I don't know. It has to wait in its turn in the queue though. Well, we can throw it open to any questions if there are any questions or.
Well, I think while there are people running up questions, one thing that occurs to me is that we have so many people in the organization, and everyone has their own different approach that they take to Jane Austen, especially when they take to this particular novel, Pride and Prejudice. So, Shannon, if you could share with everyone, what is your own take on Pride and Prejudice? Is it, how do you see Elizabeth and the other characters in there, your own particular view upon them?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've long puzzled over the question about which one represents pride and which one represents prejudice. And of course, I think most people come to the conclusion eventually that both Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth have a measure of each in them. And it's important that that we notice that neither one of them is perfect and the other one all wrong. There's plenty of blame to go around. And we're just glad that they learn and grow and come together at the end, of course. And yeah, it's my favorite novel. I think Persuasion's a close second, but it's Pride and Prejudice is still my favorite novel. And like I say, I've never written anything that that changes what happens in the novel. I've only added on to it sideways and chronologically. I've got 2 sequels to Pride and Prejudice, The Darcys of Pemberley, and then Return to Longbourn. And then I went laterally with a book for Georgiana and one for Anne de Burgh, which is still called The Ladies of Rosings Park, and I'm going to be reading from that in a little while. So I've had loads and loads of fun with it, but I also like the other novels, and so one of my goals is to write at least one book that is related to each of Jane Austen's 6. So I've got Pride and Prejudice covered, obviously, by now, and I've got a Persuasion book, The Persuasion of Miss Jane Austen, which brings Jane Austen herself in as the main character. But and then I count I've got a modern time travel book called Leap of Hope, and I count that as my Mansfield Park book. Modern girl that goes time travels and expects to find Mr. Darcy, and instead she finds herself more in a story like Mansfield Park. So what am I leaving out? Oh, and yeah, and then just the new book is Murder at Northanger Abbey, so that'll cover Northanger Abbey. And then I just have to figure out what to do with Sense and Sensibility and Emma.
In my opinion, Emma would be the toughest one to do. I mean, where else can you go with someone like Emma?
I don't know. Well, since I've done The Ladies of Rosings Park, which is partly telling the Pride and Prejudice story and partly moves beyond into a sequel form, I have thought about doing The Gentleman of, what's the name of the town?
Elton?
No, that's
Highbury?
the name of the town Emma lives in.
Oh, that'd be Highbury.
Highbury, thank you. The Gentleman of Highbury, perhaps telling the story from the gentleman's point of view. So who knows? Sky's the limit.
Well, we got one comment in here where Gina claims I have no accent. Well, Shad, you never heard me talking like a Cajun yet, so there you go.
You get just the wrong accent. Well, I just can't. I mean, when I read my own books back to myself and I read them aloud because it helps you find mistakes and it's really helpful. But they must be read with a British accent. So I guess I've worked on mine some, but my sister always laughs at me when I do it. So I'm trying not even to think about the fact that she's currently laughing at me as I slide into my British accent.
Hmm. But what brought you to Jane Austen in the first place? Everyone has their own story how we got wrapped up into this. What is yours?
I hadn't read a word of Jane Austen that I recall, and nobody ever made me read it in school, which, I think is a travesty, but I'm not sure I would have liked it then. So really my introduction, like as for a lot of people, was with Pride and Prejudice 95. I didn't see it on TV at the time, but I was shopping at Costco one day and strolling through the movie aisle, and there was Colin Firth's pretty face. And I'd already been thinking, now that my kids were older, really wanted to get back into reading and particularly reading the classics. And I thought I wanted to read Pride and Prejudice anyway. So I picked up the movie and fell in love with it and went from there. I read all the books, watched all the movies, read all the books again, looked for more, wasn't finding anything. I did come across one modern day author's idea of a sequel to Pride and Prejudice. And of course I was thrilled until I read it, and it didn't, it didn't fit my image of what that should look like at all. So actually that inspired me. If I ever meet that author, I will thank her for the inspiration, because that's what got me to sit down at my computer one day and just start writing. And I had the best time and never looked back.
That's really interesting. And of course, everyone's favorite book of most Janites' favorite book is going to be Pride and Prejudice. You mentioned that Persuasion is your second favorite. Is there a reason why?
I'm not really sure, other than maybe it's because it has a little bit older heroine, and plus everybody likes a story about second chances, I think, and so I love the fact that they get a second chance. And she wrote it, last, and when she was a more mature writer, perhaps, and had seen more of life, and I think it just has a little bit more of a mature perspective, perhaps. And so, if any of the books are autobiographical for her, that's the one I think is autobiographical.
Yeah, she had several brothers who were in the Navy.
Huh?
She had several brothers who were in the Navy.
Oh, exactly. And anyway, so that's what I expanded on in the novel I wrote, Persuasion of Miss Jane Austen, is the idea that Persuasion was autobiographical for Jane Austen.
Mm-hmm.
So
if there are any questions out there, there's a lot of great comments we're getting from everybody. So we're just kind of doing this. Perhaps maybe you want to, let's get into Northanger Abbey.
Jack?
Yes.
Here's an idea. I don't know if anybody might be just now tuning in, expecting to see the little play that we've advertised at this time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We could run it again.
There's been a change in the numbers here. We've gone from 43 to 44, so I don't know if we've got anybody's jumped in late.
Well, I mean, we could do the play again, just because this is the time we scheduled it for.
Mm-hmm.
You could work on your British accent.
Look, I'm just trying not to talk like I'm from down the bayou.
Well, I just mentioned that people can still view it on YouTube.
Oh,
you missed it in the live one.
Sure.
Right now, so it is still available on YouTube.
Well, Gina's out there screaming for it, and so I'm ready for it. Though I'm kind of
we'll forget
21st century now.
Yeah, I didn't get all my costume on either, since we started early, and sitting under these hot stage lights here, I had to peel off a layer. Okay, so let's do it again from the top.
Okay, you got it.
Okay, so for anyone who missed it before, this is taken from Pride and Prejudice, chapter 45, where Elizabeth and her aunt and uncle Gardiner have now made their second visit to Pemberley, Mr. Gardiner to accept Mr. Darcy's invitation to go fishing, and the ladies to wait on his sister Georgiana. According to the book, Elizabeth and her aunt talk over all the day's events on their return drive to Lambton, everything except Mr. Darcy, very maddeningly. Elizabeth doesn't bring up that subject. So don't you think Mrs. Gardiner would be chomping at the bit for a private conversation with her husband as soon as they are alone in the room at the inn? So here is that scene. What a day we have had, my dear, and I could barely contain my curiosity on the drive back from Pemberley, I can tell you that much. But Lizzie, the sly thing, would not say a word about the one topic that interested me most. And of course, I could not open the subject myself, could I? But since we're finally alone, I can at least hear your opinion about it.
Speak plainly, my dear. You give me far too much credit. Despite these many years of marriage, I still cannot always read your mind.
Can you not? How very strange. I seem to always know what you are thinking. Well, in any case, my question is simply this. What say you about Mr. Darcy?
Is that it? Then I say he has some of the finest fishing in the country. I wish you had seen today's catch, my love. It were some of the finest specimens I've ever had the pleasure of pulling in. There was one in particular, one of prodigious size that put up a heroic fight.
No, Mr. Gardiner, not the fishing. It is your opinion of the man I am far more interested in. What say you about your host, Mr. Darcy, now you have spent more time in his company?
Oh, well, that's another matter altogether. But my opinion of him is equally high, I should think. He is fine a fellow as I've ever come across. A great deal more civil than your average rich man.
No arrogance, then? No false pride?
None that I could see. He is perhaps a little reserved, but he could not have been more accommodating and more obliging to me. That speaks well of his character, I think, especially when you consider there could be nothing in it for him. There is no reason Mr. Darcy could have gone out of his way for someone like me. I am nowhere near his equal in wealth or position, and I have no influence or acquaintance that could possibly interest him. Yes, I thought it most positive proof of his generous nature. But you had opportunity to observe Mr. Darcy's behavior as well when he joined you and the other ladies. What is your own opinion?
Oh, I quite agree with you that he seems a very fine fellow.
Oh, very well then. There you have it.
He certainly is an impressive gentleman, with his fine, tall person and commanding presence. When Mr. Darcy entered the room today, I can tell you that every female eye was drawn to him at once. I must say that even I felt a little flutter of excitement.
That will do, Mrs. Gardiner. I believe we have an excellent picture.
Very well, but I must tell you, there was something else about him, something I observed. No, it cannot have been my imagination, can it?
You were speaking in riddles again, madam. Do explain yourself.
Oh, of course, I'm sorry. It is just this. I must beg to differ with you on one point you mentioned a moment ago. Your presumption of having no influence or acquaintance of value to Mr. Darcy. I think you may be wrong there.
Really? How so?
I believe your niece may be of very particular interest to him, in fact.
Elizabeth? That seems hardly likely. Their past acquaintance was but trifling, and you know the decided dislike she has expressed for the man.
Oh, but that was before we came to Pemberley.
What are you saying? That Lizzie has let her head be turned by his wealth? She is too firm of mind for that.
No, not that. I only meant that first impressions are not always accurate, as you must admit. Remember, it was not me, but my sister you preferred in the beginning. And likewise, first impressions are not always immutable either. By choosing me, you have proved that as well. I think a change may be at work. Lizzie did not seem to disdain Mr. Darcy's company today, and anybody who watched the two of them together this afternoon. how solicitous he was, how anxious to promote a friendship between his sister and our niece. Must suspect there is more to the connection than Lizzie has admitted.
Hmm. Perhaps you are right, my dear. But now that you mention it, Mr. Darcy could not get away from the stream quick enough once I told him that you and Elizabeth had gone to call on his sister. Clearly in his mind, that was going forward in the house was more pressing, the company there more intriguing. That was certainly the end of fishing for him.
Imagine our niece mistress of Pemberley.
Uh, do you not think that may be leaping forward too far, or at least too rapidly?
Perhaps. But oh, I'm impatient to know the truth of it, if only Elizabeth would begin the subject. You noticed how she talked all round the idea of Mr. Darcy after we came away. His sister, his house, his grounds, even his table. Everything in favorable yet guarded terms. Not one word did she venture on the interesting person at the heart of it all, the man himself, though I could have sworn she was near to busting with it one time and then another. That must mean something. If she is secretly in love with a man, who could blame her?
You do seem a bit dazzled by Mr. Darcy yourself, my dear. Perhaps the feeling is mutual. Perhaps you are the real reason he hurried back to the house today and not our niece. You're still a fine-looking woman, after all.
Oh, at my age, fie, Mr. Gardiner. How you do love to tease me.
I speak nothing but the truth.
And I love you for it, sincerely. But do be serious now and think of Elizabeth. Do not you believe her happiness would be safe in Mr. Darcy's care? Yes, I would be very pleased to see her married to him as soon as may be. What a fine establishment it would make for our niece.
And what a fine thing for us if we could be welcome to visit her at Pemberley as much as we like thereafter.
You are thinking of the fishing again, my dear.
One cannot overlook that advantage to the match.
Very true. Remember how we were forced to abbreviate our walking tour the other day when I grew too tired? I'm sure I shall never be completely happy until I've been all round the park by some means or another.
10 miles, we are told. Next time, a carriage of some sort, I should think. Perhaps a phantom with a pair of sturdy ponies.
Oh, yes, my dear, that would be the very thing.
The end again.
Yes, again. Okay, well, do we have comments or questions?
Yeah, we're getting some bravos and encores here, so we're doing all right. Oh, by the way, for those of you who have never been to New Orleans, I do have a New Orleans accent. This is a New Orleans accent. So if you've ever watched that terrible movie, The Big Easy, that we put that down, us who live down here, as the worst illustration of a New Orleans accent that has ever been put on film. And that's all I'll say about that.
And I'm just going to step in for a moment to hopefully share my screen.
Yep, I can see you.
Which is the book that this scene appears in non-play form, Pride and Prejudice Behind the Scenes.
Very good. Put in a plug for the book, yeah.
Of course.
Which, as you say, all proceeds go to charity, right?
Yes, they all go to the Jane Austen's House Museum, which has been in quite a financial crisis of late, though they seem to have gotten enough to make it through to the end of the year. But we've managed to give them a good sum over the years, and we've got another little pocketful to hand to them. So I encourage you to buy it because all the authors have agreed to donate 100% of the royalties. So, and there's lots of great scenes in it.
I would love to be volunteered to go deliver the next check to them in person if possible.
Yes,
I have
well,
yet to be there.
I've been planning to do it this June, but something came up. I can't remember what it is,
Yeah,
but something came up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I'm glad I didn't plan a trip this year because it would have gotten canceled anyway. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think now that we've done it again, and it's let's just get into your Northanger Abbey novel. So take it away.
Oh, well, I was going to as far as the reading, I was going to do that from The Ladies of Rosings Park, but I won't miss
Oh,
an
I'm sorry. Excuse me. I've got
I won't
the
miss an
wrong book.
opportunity to plug the new book too. This is my sequel to Northanger Abbey. As I told you a little while ago, I intend to do a book from each of Jane Austen's novels. I'll just read you the blurb as long as we have a minute. Newly married to her beloved Henry, Catherine's eyes are now open to the grown-up pleasures of wedded life. Yet she still hasn't quite given up her girlhood fascination with all things Gothic. When she first visited Northanger Abbey, she only imagined dreadful events that had occurred there. This time, the horror is all too real. There's been a murder, and Henry has fallen under suspicion. Catherine is determined to clear her husband's name, but at the same time, she's afraid for her own safety, since there's a very good chance the real murderer is still in the house. Dum, dum, dum. This delightful sequel reprises the mischievous spirit of Austen's original spoof on the Gothic novel, while giving Catherine a genuine murder mystery to unravel. And the book hasn't officially launched because the launch post will be on Tuesday at Austen Variations, but the book is available already. The paperback has gone live, and the Kindle version is available for pre-order, and those books will be delivered on Monday. So that's my plug for my Northanger Abbey sequel. And except to say that Diana Birchall, who's also written a Northanger Abbey sequel, we got together and we were both writing Northanger Abbey sequels at the same time, and we didn't know it. And then when we discovered it, since we're friends, we thought, hey, that'd be great to put together a program. And then this gave us the opportunity to do so. So next Saturday, we have an event scheduled for our Northanger Abbey sequels called, and The News from Northanger, A Tale of Two Sequels. And I've read hers and she's read mine by now, I think. And they're quite different. So it's really interesting to see a different person's take on the whole thing. But yes, are we time-wise, are we supposed to be starting my other reading now, Abigail?
I think it's like supposed to be at like 9:15 Eastern time, and so we got a few minutes.
Well, you talk a little bit more about what you've got coming, Jack.
Well, again, the two things. First off, I have my own version of a Northanger Abbey sequel, which is my part of my. I'll be talking about next week in more detail as part of my Jane Austen's Fighting Men series. This is the last adventure of the Scarlet Pimpernel, where it's a sequel, which I take Frederick Tilney and have him involved with a retired Sir Percy Blakeney. For those of you who have followed it, that is the Scarlet Pimpernel himself. It's my attempt of the swashbuckler. And as for my latest novel, which again is in the Jane Austen Fighting Men series, and I'll be talking about next week, is my latest one that's been released, which is my sequel to Persuasion, Persuaded to Sail. And this picks up the story right at the same point that Austen left the novel, which is the wedding of Wentworth and Anne. So again, we'll be talking about a little bit more next Sunday, not this upcoming Sunday, but in about a week. So we'll talk more about that entire. We'll be talking in general about the entirety of this thing I invented, which is the Jane Austen Fighting Men universe. So we'll save that for then. And so that's what I have out right now. I am right now writing a fourth book in that universe, which is will be released this fall, which is going to be Rosings Park. I know I've been promising this book for years. It's finally done and going through editing, and it should be released this fall. And that will be the fourth book. Meanwhile, I'm also writing a fifth book in that universe, the last one, I promise, which is Brother of the Bride, which is going to be the wedding of Georgiana, and it's a farce. So anybody who's read my other farces knows my weird, bent sense of humor. So that's where I'm going with that. So it's keeping me busy.
That sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to it. I like Agnes on there. Don't make promises like that, Jack. I promise it's coming out. It's done. You can ask my editors. They've got it. Yeah, I know. I've been promised this thing, good Lord, for years. And then
Oh, I meant don't make promises like this is the last.
It's good to finally see your face. But yeah, it's I've been promising that one for absolute years and years and years. But yeah, it's done, it's written, and it's coming out this fall. I absolutely promise that it's coming out this fall. Okay, so I think we'll switch it on over to Shannon, and let's get it going. That way we can get some comments on your reading about the ladies of again, it was
Rosings Park.
Ladies of Rosings Park, which I'm looking forward to, because kind of we've all liked playing around with Rosings Park and our own takes on Lady Catherine and everything else. So
Yeah, I'm really mad at you, Jack, for stealing my title and all that.
Which, Rosings Park?
Rosings Park, yeah.
Oh yeah, I jumped on that one quick. I wasn't giving that one up.
Well, yeah, we kind of step all over each other's toes for titles, I think. Abigail's got one that's the the Darcys of Derbyshire, and I've got one that's the Darcys of Pemberley. And so
well, what about Snowbound? I mean, good Lord, I had Snowbound, and then Abigail had to write her Snowbound. She had to put a thing on there, and then Maria had hers, so she had Snowbound in Hartford. So yeah, we do step on each other's titles.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to learn when I became a writer that there's no copyright on titles. So you can, you can.
Oh no, it's not, and that's it's just it's fun that happens, and we come up with the same ideas, kinda, which kind of means that our brains are kind of warped in the same way. Wouldn't you say that, Abigail?
Definitely worked in the same ways, but I didn't take Snowbound. I would have loved to call my book Snowbound with Mr. Darcy, but I didn't because of you. I called it Alone with Mr. Darcy.
That's right, you did.
And I just have to share something with everyone here. The word blizzard is not Regency. I wrote an entire book about Darcy and Elizabeth alone in a blizzard, and then discovered the word wasn't around in the Regency. I'm always trying to look up words to make sure they're Regency appropriate, and I was just so sure that one was, I never even looked at it.
Good Lord, it's all over that little. See, mine is an unpublished book, so I can change it.
Go in, find, replace, blizzard, snowstorm.
There you go. That's so funny. Well, enough of me hijacking this from right now. Shannon, it's all yours.
Oh boy, let me fill the next hour by myself. Thanks a lot, Jack.
Well, I'll jump back in, but you go ahead with the reading.
Okay. Well, since I've got a brand new book coming out, which is called, if I didn't mention it before, Murder at Northanger Abbey. And I'm quite sure I did mention that before. You would think I'd be doing a reading from that, but, and I will, but I'm going to do that next Saturday when Diana and I are going to do that program together. So today I decided to do one from the Ladies of Rosings Park instead. And because Lady Catherine is so much fun. So, and as I was saying before, I don't typically write variations, at least I haven't done so yet. I like to add on to Jane Austen's stories rather than switching things around. And so this is another one of those where I've expanded on her story instead of changing events. And all of my novels agree with Jane Austen's writings and don't contradict them, and they also agree with each other. So, there's similarities, but then differences because you're focusing on a different character or you're in a different time period, perhaps. But I'll mention this. I did make one minor exception to my rule of not changing anything in Jane Austen's canon. If you recall late in Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Collins writes a letter to Mr. Bennet and mentions his young olive branch, which is an allusion that he and Charlotte are expecting. But personally, I didn't think Mr. Collins should be allowed to reproduce. So in my sequels, that supposed pregnancy turns out to be a false alarm. Such is the power of the pen that I wield. Anyway, Lady Catherine is another one of those characters that's not truly evil, just slightly nasty and eccentric, and she causes a lot of unpleasantness and trouble for people. And as such, she's a very useful tool for creating a good story. And she's a lot of fun to write for. I've always heard that actors particularly enjoy playing the baddies, that they're more fun than the nice people. And even though I want nice, normal people in my life, and I want nice, normal people in my family, having a slightly off-center schemer and conniver like Lady Catherine, that's somebody I want in my books because there's a lot of story potential there. That's really how Lady Catherine pushed her way into the Ladies of Rosings Park. I started out wanting to write Anne de Bourgh's story. And, we know very little about Anne de Bourgh. We're told very little in Pride and Prejudice, and she doesn't have one single word of speech in the book itself. So I was excited about telling her story because I had all kinds of ideas about, what her life would have been like. And I intended to tell the story entirely from Anne's point of view. But then it occurred to me that I was missing a huge opportunity if I did that. The chance to get into Lady Catherine's head and to translate her warped perspective on events onto the page was just too good to miss. And so I began alternating chapters between mother and daughter, entertaining myself with how differently the two of them viewed everything. If one says the world is black, the other one will say it's white. And it's just very interesting. They can look at the same events and interpret it completely differently. So that was a good deal of fun. And then I got to include some other ladies because I had the title, The Ladies of Rosings Park, plural, the plural ladies. So I thought, well, what other ladies might be included? And that's how Charlotte and Mrs. Jenkinson, they each have a few chapters. So Abigail commented, oh, okay, never mind. So I want to read you the blurb on the book in case you're not familiar with it. At first glance, Anne de Bourgh doesn't seem a promising heroine. But beneath that quiet exterior, there's a lively mind at work, imagining how one day she will escape her poor health and her mother's domination to find love and a life worth living. Now Anne finally gets the chance to speak her mind, but Lady Catherine demands equal time. Even Charlotte Collins and Mrs. Jenkinson get into the act. Chapter by chapter, these ladies of Rosings Park take turns telling the tale from the moment Elizabeth Bennet sets foot in Hunsford, changing everything. Is Anne heartbroken or relieved to discover Mr. Darcy will never marry her? As an heiress, even a sickly one, she must have other suitors. Does Lady Catherine accept the defeat of her original plan or keep conniving? I bet you can guess the answer to that question. Will Anne's health ever improve? And what really happened to her father? And that was a lot of fun too, to add that little element to the story. So this book was a great deal of fun to write, but honestly, they all are. Every single book has been a new challenge and just a tremendous pleasure. I'm so delighted that I've had this second career in my life that I never anticipated. And it's just been a joy and a blessing all the way around. Okay, so I'd like to read you a chapter from one of the chapters from Lady Catherine's perspective. And I hope you will recognize the Lady Catherine that you all know and maybe love to hate. So here goes my Lady Catherine accent and my British accent at the same time. We'll see how that works out. It matters little what others may say on the subject of Elizabeth Bennet. I stand ready to set the record straight. Around one indisputable fact, however, the opinion of every person of sanity must unite. It is that the disaster encompassed in her unfortunate presence among us was entirely Mr. Collins's fault. To be scrupulously fair, as I always am, I looked at the question from all sides. Was I in any way to blame, I asked myself. After all, Mr. Collins may have brought Elizabeth to Hunsford, but I brought Mr. Collins. No doubt that is what a shrewd barrister would argue, and yet no one would dare to convict me on such grounds, not when my spotless character and irreproachable motives are considered. Christian charity and the principle of noblesse oblige govern all my actions. I am no fool. I knew there was nothing exceptional in Mr. Collins to justify my singling him out for such a valuable preferment. He had done nothing to earn my special favor. If I am not mistaken, and I never am, that is the very definition of grace, the stooping down to bestow a gift on the undeserving, the giving of kindness to one who does not merit it. Perhaps that was my crime after all, being more charitable than what was prudent. And how was I repaid for my goodness? Mr. Collins unwittingly delivered a viper into my bosom, one come from his family to destroy mine. I say unwittingly because I do not for 1 minute suppose he understood the danger. I did not see it myself in the beginning. The possibility that my own nephew, my dear dead sister's only son, could fail to keep his solemn engagement was the farthest thing from my mind. That Darcy might forsake Anne for a young woman without family connections or fortune, well, it was inconceivable. So I welcomed Miss Bennet into my home for the same reason I frequently did the Collinses, in a spirit of kind condescension. I held no illusions that my daughter and I could meet her on any kind of an equal footing. Considering she was a relation to Mr. Collins, I expected to find her birth inferior, her manners marginal, and her education suspect. This, by skillful questioning, I soon confirmed. Indeed, the unfortunate tendency of her information went beyond anything I had expected. She actually admitted to her family having kept no governess, despite 5 daughters brought up at home. 5! This and more she confessed without apology. No doubt I was more ashamed for her than she was for herself. And you may be sure I did not fail in my duty to give her benefit of my opinions on these and other subjects. Had I known her mother when it might have done some good, I should most strenuously have advised her to engage a qualified governess. In fact, I might have been able to go so far as to recommend someone to her. I have lost count as to how many families I have been the means of supplying in that way. I am always glad to step in where I can be of service, whether it be to settle some dispute within the parish, to see to it that a young person is well placed out, or by giving wise and timely counsel to keep a weak sort of character on the straight and narrow. There seems to be a general want of gratitude and common sense round about, which I make it my business to correct whenever possible. Oftentimes a word from me is enough to restore harmony and contentment. I believed Miss Bennet had been brought to me for the same reason, that she was yet another one who might benefit from my guidance. Although she expressed her mind too freely and without sufficient deference to her superiors, I put this down to the deficiencies of her upbringing and did not consider her faults beyond remediation. Left in proper hands, I thought something useful might very well be achieved. Here again, I allowed my kindness to lead at the expense of what would have been, in hindsight, a justifiable vigilance against the cunning Miss Bennet. But instead of raising my guard, I was thinking only of being of use to a misguided girl, of allowing the advantages I had in my gift to make their due effect. Sir William Lucas departed after a week's stay, but I knew he would soon be replaced by a person of real quality. This was yet another benefit I could provide to our visitors. exposure to better society than they would ordinarily encounter. They could not help but be impressed by the contrast and edified by such superior examples. One evening, when the diminished party from the parsonage was dining at Rosings, I decided the time was right for my announcement. Clearing my throat first to be certain I had their attention, I began. Miss Bennet, Miss Lucas, I am pleased to say that I will have it in my power to improve your society by the addition to our party of my nephew, Mr. Darcy, who will be arriving this week before Easter. I understand from Mr. Collins that you may have met him some once or twice in Hertfordshire, but now you will be seeing him nearly every day. He is a young man whom you cannot help but admire, for he embodies everything that is best about the upper classes. Miss Bennet smiled in such a way that I could not decipher what she meant by it. Nevertheless, I continued my thought. You would do well to observe and learn from him. I dare say you do not often see a man of his quality in your usual society, confined as it must be. Are you not pleased with this news, Miss Bennet? Oh, yes, she said. Mr. Darcy is very welcome, I'm sure, and I shall be happy enough to see him again. But in truth, madam, he is well known to me already. How can this be? I asked with justifiable indignation. Mr. Darcy is my nephew, after all, and the right to introduce him should be mine as well. Mr. Collins may be unaware that Mr. Darcy spent a good deal of time in Hertfordshire before his arrival, said Elizabeth. We were very often seeing Mr. Darcy in Meryton and at assemblies of one kind or another. Were not we, Maria? In fact, I spent several days in the same house with him at Netherfield, while my sister happened to be convalescing from an illness there. So you see, Lady Catherine, why I say he is well known to me. Well, there is nothing more to be said on that subject for the moment. However, you may be sure I put the question to Darcy himself when he arrived a week later, bringing Colonel Fitzwilliam, my brother's younger son, with him. Now I would know the truth of the matter. After welcoming them both in the drawing-room, I hastened to ask, Darcy, what is this I hear of your acquaintance with Miss Elizabeth Bennet? She tells me you are well known to her. Can it be so? The change in his countenance was marked and immediate. His face went quite white and then grew quite red as I waited for his answer. Clearly, he had not expected to hear that person's name spoken at Rosings. That must account for his bewilderment. Elizabeth, he asked, all at attention. Is she here? She is staying with the Collinses at the parsonage, I explained. But you did not answer my question. What is your level of acquaintance with this young lady? When he hesitated, Colonel Fitzwilliam added his urgings. Yes, Darcy, who is this Miss Bennet, and how well do you know her? Do tell us. Oh, not well at all, he said finally. I met her in Hertfordshire, Fitzwilliam, while I was visiting Mr. Bingley at Netherfield. The Bennets are one of the principal families of the neighbourhood, so naturally we were often thrown into company with them. Still, I would not say I know Miss Elizabeth Bennet particularly well. If she is here at Hunsford, however, it would be right for me to pay my respects to her, and to the Collinses, of course. He rose as if to go at once. Come, Fitzwilliam, when one has a duty to perform, it is best to do it without delay, and you may as well accompany me. A duty, is it? Remarked Fitzwilliam. Are you sure it is not a privilege and a pleasure? You seem very keen to be at it. Stay where you are, both of you, I said firmly. Tomorrow or the next day will be soon enough to begin paying calls of duty. For now you must rest from your travels and give your attention to those who have a higher claim to it. Ah, here is Anne. I had sent for her as soon as the gentleman arrived. Now, however, I could have wished she had been less prompt answering my summons and taken more time attending to her appearance first. Mrs. Jenkinson would be reprimanded for allowing Anne to come down in such a state. in a very ordinary gown, her hair mussed and her spirits not fully composed. Fortunately, Darcy and Fitzwilliam seemed not to notice anything amiss. They both rose to cordially welcome Anne, each taking her hand in turn. Fitzwilliam, I knew, would flatter and make jokes, but I was much more interested to observe Darcy's interactions with my daughter, to watch for some advancement in their courtship. I intended they be given every opportunity for that kind of progress to occur. Indeed, that was my purpose for sending for my nephew. It was high time some definite plan for their wedding was made. Darcy, you sit beside Anne, I directed. Fitzwilliam, I will have you next to me. I am pleased you have come. You must tell me how my brother does and all your family. He was in good spirits, and I allowed him to chatter on, following his banter as well as possible, while at the same time keeping one eye on the other pair. There was very little of a satisfactory character going forward there, however. And that's the end of the chapter. So, Lady Catherine's not very pleased with the developments, and of course you can imagine that she's not very pleased with how the whole story comes out either. So the Ladies of Rosings Park is part of the Darcys of Pemberley collection, but it stands on its own. And it's available in Kindle and paperback and audio. So I hope you enjoyed that little reading. And, you know, despite my questionable acting abilities. And I would love to answer any questions about that book or anything else for that matter. Despite the fact that the segment is entitled Lady Catherine Gets the Last Word or whatever, we don't actually have to let Lady Catherine have the last word. Hello, Abigail. It looks like you're back with me.
Yes, I just came on to thank you for that reading, and I have to share one comment over here, some comments over here. One was that you really had your Judi Dench on while you were doing Lady Catherine. So I really like that. Great job with Lady Catherine's point of view.
Thank you.
So you got lots of compliments waiting for you in the chat room when you have time to go over and look at them.
Oh, that would be a lot of fun. Yes, thank you. Did anyone have any questions? Or I'm not super great at talking off the top of my head, but I could try. Do we have time to fill? I guess we didn't have a finishing time, did we?
We don't have a finishing time, and because we're complete amateurs, we didn't really think about what we do at the end of the evening. Now, did we? We never even considered this, but I want to say that I've really enjoyed this, and it's so great to see so many of our readers here, to have seen the faces and seen the interactions in chat. I hope you'll all be back tomorrow. We've got another big day starting at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'll be doing a talk which will shock some of you, so that should make you come. Yes, and then Joanna Starnes and Jennifer Altman will be doing virtual tea with you and sharing some parts of their books. Maria Grace is doing a question and answer about the research rabbit hole. And then there will be another mini play, which is, I got to sit on the rehearsal of it. It was absolutely hilarious. Diana Burchell, Siri James, and Paul Burchell in the Austen Assizes, which is a spoof where Mrs. Bennet has brought a lawsuit against Lady Catherine de Bourgh. So I think you'll really enjoy that. So I hope you'll all come back for that. I'll also be getting on a little early tomorrow at 1:30 in case anyone just wants to come in and chat. That won't be live on YouTube, just in case anyone wants to chat in a more informal way. I'll be here at 1:30. So, but we'll be seeing all of these people again. Jack Caldwell will be back next weekend. Jack, do you want to tell us what you'll be doing next weekend?
Well, what I'm going to be doing is, as I talked before, I'm going to be expanding on what the heck is the Jane Austen's Fighting Men universe. And it's not just soldiers, but it was what I utilized to create my second published novel, which is The Three Colonels. And to make it real quick, I just simply made up a single idea that all of Jane Austen's characters knew each other. And from that, I'm now going to write my fifth book on that, with that true concept, while staying true to the characterizations that Austen wrote in the original novels. So that's a lot of fun when you do that, when you're writing sequels rather than a reimagining, which is a lot of fun. We've all done it. Abigail's a master at the reimagining and the variation. But so this one is explain how it comes up. We have PowerPoint presentations and all kinds of things because it really gets kind of complicated. But it's a lot of fun. And I hope that you'll join me and join the rest of us, not only this weekend, but also next weekend. We've got some really fun things for you that will interest all of you in one way or another.
Yes, and I think Lucy Murrin is still here, and she's going to be doing a panel next weekend with Elizabeth Adams and Amy DeRazio, Troping the Light Fantastic. Do I have that name right? Maybe. Anyway, it'll be about tropes in Jane Austen fan fiction, and I'm really looking forward to hearing that one too. Maria Grace will be back, as I said, with a question and answer tomorrow, and she has talk next week as well as a discussion on Jane Austen fan fiction and fantasy, including her dragons, and who can get enough of Jane Austen and dragons. So lots more happening. Thank you for bearing with all of our amateur technology here. So we really appreciate you bearing with us. Any other questions?
Yes, Chris has a question about what time we're starting on Pacific time. Yeah, I think Robin's answered that. It's going to be 11 a.m. All the times that are on our Facebook page. Is it, Abigail? I think it's all Eastern time, so do the math. I feel sorry for our friends across the pond. They have to do a lot more mathematical figuring out of what time we're all going to be here.
I see there's a question from Jan. She says, how many Darcy's of Pemberley books are there? And currently there are 4. This was the original book, my direct sequel to Pride and Prejudice. And that's followed chronologically by Return to Longbourn, which is mostly Mary and Kitty's story, but has all the other cast of characters in it too. And then from there, I branched out sideways, laterally, and wrote Georgiana's book, Miss Georgiana Darcy of Pemberley. And most recently, the other lateral, oh, you can't even see these books, all you can see is my face. Other lateral extension was The Ladies of Rosings Park. So there they are, all 4 of them so far.
Oh, there's one other thing that I want to throw out there since I run it for the group. We have not given up on the book sale. That starts up a week from today for 4 days. We'll be having an announcement on Monday with the details on that. But yeah, we're coming back with the book sale. So there you are.
Yes, and that's next weekend. And so I hope you're ready to stock up your Kindles. So if there aren't any more questions, I think we'll call it an evening here. But if anyone wants to stick around for a little bit to chat, there's no problem with that either. We're happy to answer any questions or just to hear what you have to say. And I clearly cannot keep up with all the comments on the side, even though I try. I think I need a babysitter. So.
I've been scanning through them and trying to look for questions, but I just found that one from Jen.
So in any case, thank you so much for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow and next weekend.
And thanks again for hosting, Abigail.
Thank you all. It was lovely.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for coming.
Thank you.
And obviously, for those of us who are members of Austen Variations, one of the things we've learned from this is that we need to have someone hosting each of these. That this idea that we were just going to move smoothly from one thing to another. So I hope we can work that out. So
Well, this is the amateur hour, so we may be professional at writing books, but not at broadcasting.
yeah, I think I'm doing really well. None of my cats photobombed yet. So I think I'm
I have to
ahead of the
admit, I'm
game.
a little disappointed in that.
Yeah, where's Poofer?
I
What's
mean,
her name?
both you,
Pfeffernuss.
I mean,
Pfeffernuss.
come on. You and Maria are just famous for your cats and didn't get photobombed by either one. Now, come on, we'll go ahead and do much better tomorrow.
I'll do
Cat
my best.
almost
And
photobomb. Yeah.
Lucy's got her.
Oh, there we go. Lucy's.
Oh, wow.
She
Not only
almost
I'm the only
disconnected
guy
me
in the
during
group,
my
I'm the
reading.
dog
So,
guy. So everybody else is.
yeah.
I'm just glad my internet connection didn't
Yeah.
break down. Yay!
Yay,
How
it
big
held
is
out.
that
And I
one,
really love
Lucy?
your background. So
Thank you.
Y'all did a great job. Great job.
Thank you very much.
it's
Lucy,
really
how
been
big is
fun.
that cat?
So
Actually, I thought it was real wallpaper, so it's perfect.
It's my grandmother's blanket is what it is.
There you go.
A blanket that used to belong to my grandmother. I have no idea how old it is, but
hey, that works. So, and it's nice that one's house.
I think Chris is trying to say something here. I can barely make it.
Yeah, I don't think.
There you are.
Well, Abigail knows me a little bit. I'm the translator of Nicole Clarkson.
Oh,
Ah,
Yes, and Chris is also the head of jazz. Help me out, Chris here. Jane Austen Society of Mexico. Sorry,
Yeah.
I can't get them all right. Help me out here.
No, don't worry. It happens all the time. Yeah, it is Jazz MX. And I just started it last year. So it's the Jane Austen Society of Mexico. And we are just, it's a little tiny, but little by little, we are growing up.
And Chris also runs a Facebook group for Spanish-speaking readers of Jane Austen Variations. I'm not going to try and pronounce it because I'll embarrass myself. So, and that has actually grown quite remarkably.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Lately, it has got, well, a lot of people for Spanish-speaking people know a lot of Abigail's books in Spanish. Sadly, most of them because they piracy a lot their books. So what I've been doing is to try to give people more reasons of why they have to stop pirating books, and to that you are able to buy a book, you are able to buy something that is more expensive, a book. Please buy a book, because that's the way you can encourage the authors to keep translating the books, to keep bringing on all their books to different countries. It's a lot of work to do, because sadly, a lot of people, they don't care. They don't really care how they steal all those books. And I think we have a lot of work to do, because knowing that there are like more than 400 of variations and continuations for Jane Austen's novels is amazing.
Yes, well, you got a couple of authors here who don't have any books in Spanish yet. You can work on them.
Yeah, I already sent a request to Jack, because it's really interesting to see the point of view of a gentleman.
Well, I appreciate that. I try to write for everybody. It's not just guys. And so I really work very hard to write a book that not only men are going to enjoy, but women as well. And am beyond pleased and honored that so many of you have bought my work and has said so many kind words about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I hope one day I'm able to work with you, Abigail.
Maybe so eventually. I've been very fortunate to have a very loyal Spanish translator who keeps going through my books and is faster at translating them than I am at writing them. But
Yeah,
we may get there eventually.
yes, Tere is a great translator to work with, and I think she's been doing a great job with your books. And Shannon, that's the translator that I'm recommending to you. And I think she can do a very good job with your books because
Yeah.
she knows really well how to transmit what you want, what you have in your books, but for Spanish-speaking people.
It's difficult because, of course, I will have no way to judge since I don't speak Spanish. Because I have two books that are published in Hungarian, and I don't speak Hungarian either. So I'm just trusting that those have been well done. I think I'm the only one in our group that has books in Hungarian. So I wish there was as many Hungarian speakers in the world as there are Spanish speakers. However, it's a pretty small exclusive club.
Oh yes, you're right, Shannon. I don't think there are any other Hungarian published Jane Austen fan fiction.
Yeah, maybe not for Jane Austen, but for other authors, is growing. How many people in that country are hungry for more books translated to their language?
Well, one thing that's been a huge surprise for me is how big Jane Austen is in Brazil. I would never have picked Brazil as a place that would be full of Jane Austen fans, but boy, the Brazilians just love Jane Austen. And Pakistan, for some reason in Pakistan, Jane Austen is enormously popular.
Wow.
Wow.
It is growing in many places. For example, in Mexico, we are just starting a book club reading Pride and Prejudice, and we are getting a lot of people that want to join to our conversation of Pride and Prejudice. And we are doing it each Saturday, 5 chapters each week. So it's going to be from here till August. So yeah, these weekends are really packed.
Yes.
Very busy. And then I'm launching a book in the middle of it. So it's pretty busy.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Hi, Candy. I can see you now and that I've opened it to gallery view.
Yeah, she's just sitting there waving.
Yeah, I was still muted, so it's good to see you.
Aren't very many of us left, so I guess you can unmute yourselves and
Yeah.
Actually, I think I'm going to stop the YouTube live stream now.
Oh yeah.
So that we can just chat.